Hello and welcome to That Thing I Did for a Year, a podcast where we interview fourth-year University of Toronto students on experiences they had in a year away from school. My name is Ilya. I'm a fourth-year industrial engineering student here at University of Toronto, and I'm going to be speaking to Alison today. Behind production is Arkady Hungarotsky, a fourth-year engineering science student and the mastermind behind the operation. So today we are talking to Alison. Alison, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Ilya.
Hi.
I'm also a fourth-year industrial engineering student, but I guess today I'm going to be talking a lot about my PY. So over the 16 months, what I've been working on, and I got to basically try a lot of different hats on throughout these 16 months. So that was really fun. I started as a PM at Microsoft, and then I tried out development at NVIDIA. I moved to Germany for a bit for a startup. And then I went back to Seattle to my roots.
So your roots to just like do another internship as a product manager at Microsoft?
Yeah, I did, on a different team.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So before you got into PY, I guess initially, like, why did you come into engineering? Like, what was your thought process on what that was going to look like?
Yeah, I think when I was in high school, I kind of just really liked math and physics.
Sure.
It was just kind of that biased part. And I assumed that, if you just go into engineering, it's just that. Obviously, I was really wrong. And when you go in, what I really fell in love with was design. And like the whole, I'm sure you relate to this because I know you love design as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like the engineering design process, understanding like what are the user's needs, what are the problems that they're going through, and how do we actually fix that, and how do we problem solve. I think that's the best thing about engineering. And
where did you like find that? Because you were in engineering science first year.
Yeah, I was. And it was through Praxis, actually.
Shout out Jason Foster.
Shout out to Praxis. And I had a really good team actually in my second semester, and we got to work on some really cool projects revolving like escaping a plane. So
wow.
It was some cool stuff. Yeah. I think I did more in first year than I'm doing now, which is kind of funny. Yeah, I think the design process is super cool, and that's kind of what led me to wanting to be a PM more, but also kind of see the technical sides of things as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that part of the logic of like why you switched into industrial?
I think in EngSci it was kind of really knowing a lot of different things, and
Sure.
I wasn't really going deep enough into a lot of things. I actually enjoyed like design, for example, or more stats related courses. So I didn't really want to do another general second year. And I think I wanted more time as well for myself to really focus on what I actually enjoyed and what kind of jobs I'm interested in, for examples, and different clubs, because I was really involved in YNCN during that time as well. So I kind of just wanted to set time for myself, and I think that helped actually kind of figuring out what I wanted to do.
True.
Yeah.
You got, like, you mentioned you were involved in YNCN and like, a couple of different organizations, but you got involved in like a heavy job searching process pretty early on. Like, can you like talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. I made fun of it all the time.
Well, let's do it on air.
In first year, I had really good mentors, like in Frosh Week, as well as even during EngSci, like some really cool people, upper years, who kind of geared me towards thinking about what I actually wanted to work on. And I think that really helped me decide on like, that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to figure out what I liked in life. So I went to a lot of different kinds of talks, different career fairs, essentially, kind of just in first year when I definitely couldn't get a job that I really wanted then, just to kind of understand what's out there. And then that made me kind of excited. It's like, what are the different kinds of jobs an engineer can do? And it's like a million. There's like anything, which is kind of why I started even job searching more and kind of figuring out like what I enjoyed and talking to a lot of different people. So that made me want to.
Did you work an engineering type job after first year?
I did research in biomed. So I kind of followed the EngSci path, and I did research in first year summer under a biomed/mech prof.
Sure.
And that was interesting. It was a small lab, and we did basically a lot of like, imaging for basically when you have a brain aneurysm. So kind of analyzing the blood flow during that.
Okay.
It was it was fun.
True. How did you approach job search, like being in second year?
Yeah, even in first year when I was like searching for profs, that felt like searching for a startup job. Because a lot of times I feel like when you reach out to startups, you're really reaching them personally through LinkedIn or through email, right?
Right.
And even if you apply on their like AngelList job portal, for example, like it's a lot of like personal connections that you have to make with profs also. So that kind of helped me a lot with second year. And it was really through the career fair that I got Microsoft for my first job, my first real job.
So I guess just like for context, you ended up working as a product manager at Microsoft like in the summer after your second year.
I've worked there 3 times, but every single time it's been on a different team, and it's been like a completely different experience. Like, because in such a big company, all the different teams kind of operate in their own ways. The managements are completely different, and I worked a lot more with devs and as a dev in my first summer there, because it was an Explorer program where they take first and second years, and you get to work with 2 other interns on basically the whole PM cycle. Designing, figuring out that problem and working with designers, then actually building what you design, which is awesome. And testing it, making sure it works, and then shipping it. So we got to do that entire end-to-end.
Like start to finish design process. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, so I really like that. That was probably one of my favorite internships too.
So given that it sounds like you did everything, how would you define the work of a product manager in like tech company, or like at least in a big tech company?
A big tech. It's really first understanding like what are the problems that we're trying to solve. Because usually I feel like a lot of features are solution driven. So we kind of want to build something because it's cool. Sure. Or it fits well with the company culture, the motto, the structure of what the product is. But finding out what that initial problem is and diving down and understanding where it's coming from, like that's the hardest part. And definitely like that's where, if you don't mess up there, everything else would kind of go smoothly from there. So that's, I think, the first stage. Second stage would be kind of the design process. You get to work with a lot of designers as a PM, scoping it, understanding then how it fits with the product. And then working with engineers to actually like build it, and then finally kind of leading them to really test it, and then shipping it and maintaining it. So you get a lot of feedback that things go wrong, and being able to like go back and iterate, I think is part of it being a PM. Right. Yeah.
I mean, so the way you're describing it, it sounds like figure out the problem and then on all scales get shit done.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, I feel like in a lot of our human factors classes, even in industrial engineering, like that is kind of one thing we focus on, understanding kind of like what are the user's needs, and then going forward with it.
Right, fair enough. I guess like the thing that we don't practice as much is like carrying it through, because it is a class after all.
You're right.
That's I guess
it's kind of the design phase then that we cover in AD, not really the development process.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that something that, I mean, even just like in your first term with Microsoft and then in the second time you did it, the summer after third year, is that something that you found you had to work on, like the actually making things happen in a large company?
Definitely. Like, I think that I was really sheltered in my first internship. That was when it was my first time here. They knew that we were all kind of second years and we didn't have much experience. So the feature that we were developing was very separate from the product. So I was working on Visual Studio Team Services, and that's essentially kind of the Jira competitor of Microsoft, Trello, for example.
Okay, so these are the project management tools.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, gotcha. So we were PMing project management tools.
Okay, gotcha.
And what we were working on was like a custom control extension. So it was kind of an add-on onto the platform. So it was much like if we broke something, it would not break the product, for example.
Gotcha.
And it was more about mentorship and understanding like how things worked. That was the focus of that internship. But the second one, coming back, I thought it'd be kind of similar, but it was different in the way there's so much more responsibility and a lot more having to communicate with engineers and designers well, like the full-time engineers and managers, and making sure your point comes across clearly and they understand like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
What's an example of that? Like, what does that look like?
For example, like for that project, I was working on an app. It's an app marketplace, Azure Marketplace / App Source, and essentially what the problem was not defined when I was there. So I kind of had to understand the product, then kind of, hey, like what's missing in App Source today? Like what? And one thing I was missing was kind of like, how do we enable all apps to have a fair advantage on our marketplace? How do we also push apps that are much better than others and give them a fair advantage, even if they aren't as popular, for example, but they have a good quality in their apps?
Interesting.
It's an interesting problem, and that was kind of like what we scoped it down to, and being able to justify that like to my manager and being like, this is the problem we're going to solve. Like this is, and why it's important. It's because like, this is the first thing you see when you land on our page. Like featured apps is not even a thing right now. So we need to have something that kind of like shows kind of the recommendations you want to give to users and help them like achieve their goals easily. So
give them the tools they need.
Exactly. So that was like one example, I think, of what happened.
So it was not only coming up with the problem, but also communicating to other people why it's important.
And there's a lot of times like during the development stages, like having to meet deadlines, but having kind of two separate teams working alongside you. So design working with their own deadlines and engineering working with their own deadlines.
Okay.
So that's kind of difficult because a lot of times decisions aren't prioritized the same way, obviously. Like the label of a button not being the right font size and not the font color doesn't really impact engineering as much as it impacts design, for example. Yeah, and communicating that across is, I think, is a really difficult part in my
How'd you learn to do that?
internship. I think it helped doing one-on-ones with designers and engineers and realizing that everyone kind of is trying to do the same thing. Everyone's just communicating it really differently. Like designers want to get things done. Right. So do engineers. But there are different timelines or different deadlines, for example, that have to be completed. And as long as I give the minimal but most important information to each of the groups, they're happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then understand, I think that I gave too much information. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, this is what design's doing. But
they don't care.
I just need to give them a spec where these color codes are there and everything.
Right.
Instead of having to involve them in every stage. So that's kind of how I dealt with it. Like knowing what people care about. And how do I address those needs? And
not just not being fluffy on top of that.
Exactly. Like don't just like not talking for the sake of talking, but actually giving them value.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Do you like working as a product manager?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I realized I loved it a lot more throughout my different internships. Like working as a dev and working as a business intelligence engineer. I can talk about that later.
Okay, well, I mean, let's get into that.
Yeah.
So you spent the summer after second year doing the Explorer program in product management, and this is in Seattle. Every time you're working for Microsoft, it's in Seattle.
Yeah.
And then again for the summer after second year.
Yeah.
But I mean, to backtrack a little bit, how did you, like you're coming off this internship after second year, and you knew you wanted to do PEY.
Yeah.
How did you think about your PEY?
Yeah, I actually didn't know for sure I would do PEY.
Okay.
Until I talked to a lot more people about it. So like having a lot of good, like again, good mentors. Like a lot of people told me to just graduate and just not do PEY.
Interesting. Why?
To, I don't know, make another year of new grad salary. I think that's one main reason of why people would not do it. To just graduate earlier, like get into real life quicker, that kind of aspect. But I personally, I didn't really relate to that because I didn't think I had enough experience. I know I had worked for a company before, but I hadn't worked as a dev ever. And being a PM, you work with designers and devs all the time. And even though we're in engineering, I feel like I haven't proven my ability to code and actually create things yet. And I really wanted a more technical role. Like I was lucky in my PM job. They let me code a lot actually. So I made the ranking algorithm for all the featured apps, for example, in like SQL and in C#. And then I kind of missed that part. Like I wanted the part where you get to actually build and test your products. So that's kind of why I did PY. And I was like, I want to diversify my experiences. I don't want to leave undergrad kind of only having worked at one company. Right. And that's kind of how I felt like.
So you ended up working at, 3 companies, but over the course of 4 different stints.
Yeah.
And they were starting at different times. How did you go about looking for jobs?
Yeah. So I was lucky that from Explore to my summer PM internship, I already had my return. So that was, I signed that.
So you had the first summer taken care of.
Yeah. So, and then when I was looking for fall, I was really applying for summer and fall. So a lot of companies don't do fall internships unless you really request for it. And you would be much easier to request for it after you get the job. For example, after you've gone through, like, they've invested time in you and money.
So that's interesting. So basically you would see a summer internship, you apply for it, and then if you got it, then you'd say, hey, could I actually start in September?
Exactly.
Interesting.
And it went well. Like, they let me switch. But basically I met NVIDIA at the career fair again. So it's funny, I actually thought about it. Most of my jobs are from career fairs. So it's kind of weird. Is that common?
But so that's the thing. I would say no.
No, right?
Because I've heard that from literally nobody. So I think that's an awesome thing to dig in on. Like, how do you approach career fairs? I mean, in this case, how do you physically approach career fairs?
I definitely had like a lot of experience from first year and second year working at the career fair when I was on YNCN.
Interesting.
So I worked on that team and I was part of bringing companies, and one of them was actually Microsoft to bring to career fair. And then I think it's about showing, like, sure, you can have that spiel about yourself, what you do, but just being friends with them, like getting to know the recruiters, like they're people too. They've heard the same thing again and again. Right. And actually back in the day when I was in high school, I used to work for my mom a lot, and we used to work in trade shows. And that's when you talk to someone for like 8 hours straight about selling shoes. That's what I was doing. Gotcha. Selling shoes to retail stores. And I know it's so annoying, kind of like answering the same questions or having to deal with the same problem. So
Right.
just kind of standing out, like, hey, how's your day? And then saying how, oh yeah, I worked here before and I really like what your company does. Like, just knowing what the company is.
Right.
Helps a lot.
Instead of like, tell me about
heard
Microsoft.
that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I think that's definitely a great thing. And it help kind of talking to more than one person at that booth.
Okay.
Like talking to not just the recruiter, but also the engineers who are staffing the booth too, because they're usually the ones who can tell you a lot about what the job actually is.
Right.
And then they can, and being honest too, at the NVIDIA booth, like I was just honest about liking human factors, about liking front end, and liking like building things. I never said I wanted to really be a dev. I was just saying kind of I enjoy doing this, and it happened that the person I was talking to, that engineer, was looking for a front end developer. And that doesn't happen at like hardware companies.
Right, because for context, what does NVIDIA do?
They're a GPU company, and it's a very hardware focused. I mean, like they're responsible for like self-driving cars, gaming, lots of areas I'm not very proficient in actually. Yeah. But then the one team I was talking to, they're responsible for they use machine learning to essentially help the engineers on our team across NVIDIA test GPUs. And every single day they would have to view these GPUs on like a viewer tool, and it wasn't greatly designed, essentially. And it was an in-house product. It wasn't something that was delivered to customers. Like it was just engineers who were using it. But they happened to be looking for someone who was like technical, but also really caring about how to design things well. And at an NVIDIA booth, you don't really get people who are looking to do that.
Usually people are coming in with hardcore ECE
exactly.
skills. Yeah.
So then it happened there was a fit, and it was purely luck, but also I think I talked to a lot of people before that in different places where it didn't go as well. So it's like luck.
Would you be okay with like
plus
sharing
hard work.
that? Like what like where else were you looking?
So I was at fall career fair in third year. I was looking like everywhere. I mean, I had to Google and Facebook. I remember Facebook told me, I think it's funny because they looked at my resume and they saw industrial engineering and they're like, no, we're not hiring this degree. So it's funny.
They're not hiring this degree.
So
wow.
I've had some experiences that are like not great, and that's the real, because that's kind of the real world scenarios of career fairs. It's hard. So many people are kind of lining up. It gets really exhausting, honestly, and everyone's trying to get the same thing, and it's competitive. So there are definitely times where I felt like I wasn't good enough, or they didn't want to hire me kind of moments. But then there were companies like NVIDIA or Microsoft where they actually wanted to get to know me, and these are companies I wanted to work for. So career fairs are pretty helpful. Like, even if you don't get a job from it, at least you know how the people are at that company, and if you want to work with those kinds of people.
Did you find that the people who are in front of you at career fairs were representative of the people in the company?
That's a good question. For me, yes, actually, because the person who interviewed me and who recommended me at the career fair was on my team, and I really liked working with him. I think it depends. Like, if you get lucky, if someone's also like really tired, hasn't eaten lunch, then they probably aren't that friendly. Right. But I think it's the best you can really get, unless you know someone at that company, or you can like interview them, you can talk to them. It's close as I can get. It's better than kind of researching on the web. Like, getting to talk to them
where they get to show their polished self. Yeah.
I mean, they also bring people in that they think are fit for that company culture. I feel that's what people do. Right. Which is like pros and cons of that, definitely. But it helps, like, definitely. Yeah. Many people from those companies.
Okay, so you talked to the people.
So I talked to them, and then they followed up with me for some phone interviews, and that was actually that's it for NVIDIA. And I was also interviewing with the POI portal companies, but they seem to be really very set on 16-month or 12-month internships. There was one startup that I got in New York City that was willing to cut it to 4 because Waterloo students, they were hiring them. So
they had the process.
They understood. They're like, they wish that they could hire me for 12 because you can kind of like get that visa and have it across 12 instead of 4, so you're saving money.
Gotcha. Right.
But so that was one experience. But yeah, definitely applying for summer and when you're looking for fall helps. And even when they don't have like a job opening, like, just if you're really interested, reach out. Like, reach out to someone on that team, HR, engineer, anything. Like, you never know, I feel like.
Right.
Yeah.
True. So you ended up knowing about your NVIDIA job, which was your September through December. Yeah, right. Yeah. So you go to Seattle for the summer for your second Microsoft stint.
Yes.
Were you looking for jobs for January then?
Good question too. So I was looking for winter as well during my third year. Okay. Because basically what was happening was that the engineering office didn't really let me do PY unless I had 12 months.
Right.
So I was trying to prove to them, like, if I could add it all up, 4 plus 4 plus 4, that's 12.
That's what they teach you in first year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then I could kind of like swing by and get PY, but that didn't happen. So, but I was still under the impression I could do that. So during the entire, I was pretty stressed in third year. Like, it was good having like a low course load. But then after I found NVIDIA, I was also looking for different jobs in kind of data and more analyst positions.
Why were you looking for that? Just for diversity?
I wanted to just try something new. Like, I also was looking for kind of different tech companies that were smaller. So like a smaller startup, for example, because I hadn't ever worked at a startup.
Sure.
I wanted to do something I didn't ever try. Because when are you going to get opportunity to just take time off and travel in between, work at a company you like, leave after 4 months when you graduate. So I want to take advantage of that. And I did. I basically got an offer at an accounting firm as like a data analyst at KPMG. And that was kind of set for the winter. And I was able to push that from like summer to fall to winter.
So you pushed it 8 months.
They're really nice about it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and I talked to basically the different engineers in that group as well as like the engineering manager. So this super cool people.
So this is at KPMG, which is an accounting firm. What was the role that you were in?
It was data analytics consultant. I don't know what that means.
Something like that.
Yeah. And that was kind of like I had my 12 months set. And I left my summer kind of open that I would apply during because they weren't open.
So and this you're talking about your second summer of PY.
Yeah, my last one. I know it's a really important summer. That's kind of the summer that defines like your return offer, for example.
Right.
And
so, I guess just like for context, oftentimes, like, especially bigger companies, they will try to hire people who worked with them and are heading into fourth year for a return offer. So like these people who have already worked for them, they're coming out of fourth year, so they're trying to bring them back. Exactly. So and that's why you're saying it can be more important.
Yeah, I guess like they invested time in you for an internship. They want to, if you perform well, they want to bring you back for full time.
Right. So you were thinking about that.
Yeah. So then I was thinking like that's the company I want to work at, kind of if I'm interviewing for that last company. But what happened was that I really enjoyed my summer at Microsoft, like being a PM. I talked a lot about that. And then I got to California for my dev job, and I loved my team, and it was a great culture. But I didn't really get that experience of working on a team where like kind of everyone was involved with this feature. It was very separated.
Sure.
So what my feature was mine, essentially. Yeah. I worked with one mentor all throughout the 4 months, and I was separated from the team. And I didn't really get to see what the impact was. So when I was doing that, I was kind of also looking for different jobs. I was just like, do I really want to work for a big company again? Like, do I want to just diversify and try a smaller company where things can move really fast? And I get to work constantly with different departments, for example. Like I'll be on the same floor as marketing, design, and everybody. So I wanted to try that. And then I also wanted just to move.
Sure.
I love the Bay Area and I love Seattle, but I've only worked in North America, so I just wanted to try seeing somewhere else. And I was looking at basically the tech hubs in Asia and Europe.
Sure.
So startups there, like I think that would be easier for me to get a job at a startup overseas than to get kind of big company that knows I'm a Canadian citizen to move me to a different office. So like it just logistically worked out better that both of my needs were like work for a company that's far away and a smaller one. Right. So you can.
Well, yeah. So basically, like you were looking for these jobs despite the fact that you had KPMG lined up.
Yeah, exactly. And I was also interviewing for different corporate companies. Like I was interviewing with Yelp, for example, like different places. But while I was doing this, I kind of had it in mind that I didn't want to be stuck. Like I knew I had an option to move out of what I was in. Like I wanted to just try something new. I wanted to work at a faster company, for example. And after talking, like it was kind of weird because I never actually applied for a startup job, like ever. So what was happening was that I was researching, talking to a lot of people. And what happened was I was just using Google and AngelList and whoishiring.io.
So the AngelList is just a website where startups will put up their jobs.
Exactly. Startups, you can see how much funding they have, what series they're in, for example, and what they do and who's actually working there and like what are their backgrounds. Very transparent company process. So it's awesome kind of seeing that. And that made me want to work for a startup even more. I was looking at this, I was talking to people every day. And I was like, this is what I want to do for these 4 months because that could define like what I want to do after grad. Like, what if I want to work for a startup? So basically I just cold emailed a lot of people, applied for a lot of jobs I didn't know for sure I wanted actually. Sure. It was a lot of like the job I ended up taking was a business intelligence analyst, so engineer position.
Okay.
And like, what does that mean, right?
Well, I mean, I hope you'll tell us in a second.
Yes.
But which company was this? What was their name? What do they do?
It's called Stylelounge, and it's in Hamburg, Germany. It's a fashion search engine startup, but it's really for price comparison. So
Okay.
imagine yourself wanting to buy like Calvin Klein pair of jeans, but there's a million websites kind of selling the same thing.
Sure.
So it aggregates all the websites and shows you the one that has the cheapest.
Okay,
Pair of
so
jeans.
you can get the cheapest Calvin Klein jeans. Nice.
Very simple process. It was mainly based in Germany, and they had like basically BD people working from Switzerland, Netherlands, etc., different countries, France as well. So pretty like international for a European country. European, like a European company. Company. And so that was really fun, and I just kind of learned more about them through talking to the different people.
Sure.
Through interviews. And I had to do some IQ tests. There's a lot of it's a very different recruiting process.
I'm sure yours was very high.
Very different recruiting process than North America. So it was interesting. And I kind of just I think I just wanted to try something new.
Right.
Like, I've just planned out so many things in my life where I was like, this is the time I need to just try something. And what happened was that I had to say no to KPMG. And they were really nice about it. They understood. And I told them kind of early enough that they could definitely hire someone for that winter position. And I talked to a lot of people from KPMG too, and it seemed like I would fit in more in that startup environment than KPMG. So that's how I decided against it. And I don't think that bridge is really burned. Surprisingly, like I think there's a popular belief that if you don't take this one job from a company, you're on this blacklist. And I'm sure a lot of companies definitely do have this.
Sure.
But if you kind of approach it in a mature way, where it's like, hey, this is like what makes me happy. Essentially, like I think people understand, like a good company will understand where you're coming from. Like they don't want to hire someone that isn't happy to work for them.
It sounds like you were very straightforward with them, though.
Yeah, I was. And I called them on the phone too to talk to them. And I was like, I'm sorry, like this is kind of what's best for me. And like they understood. It wasn't like a full-time thing. It was an internship. Sure. So I think I made the right decision. Like
it sounds like you did.
Working for that startup was really, really rewarding.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So I got a visa like on my own. They don't have that kind of cushy tech process that a lot of different tech companies have.
Okay.
In like the Bay Area, where they help you with your visas and relocation packages and everything. So what happened is I kind of just got my own visa from the German embassy here. And packed my bags.
By here you mean
in Toronto.
In Toronto.
Yeah.
So you went to the German embassy.
Office. Yeah, exactly.
And you were like, hey, give me a visa.
Yeah, exactly. And they didn't know, like they never hired a Canadian citizen, like ever.
Sure.
And
as new for them as it was for you.
It's new for them. They're pretty diverse company, but only within Europe.
Yeah.
So they couldn't really help. For example, like the HR department is like 2 people, for example. So I was on my own. I was just messaging a lot of people like, how do I do this? And Google helped. Yeah. It was actually a pretty seamless process, but problems with my passport was expiring, so I had to like fly back, and that was another story.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So you got your visa in Toronto.
Yeah, I got my visa in Toronto. I had to book my plane once I had the visa confirmed, I could book my flight ticket. So expensive. I had to pay for my own flights.
Sure. Going
there too. So I got there, and then I had to find a flat, everything like that. Like it was really pretty hard in both in California to find a flat. I remember like to find basically a house to live in with other people. I didn't really know anyone. It was a lot more Waterloo interns than UT interns in the Bay Area, which is kind of sad. But so I always lived with random roommates, so this wasn't really a new thing. Yeah. So I kind of messaged someone, found this German roommate.
Where did you message them? Like, what does that look like?
Found some housing pages on Facebook.
Okay.
I think Facebook actually is safer than like Craigslist.
Yeah.
Like you see their profile, you can basically analyze someone's Facebook profile.
They're like
I know
human.
If they're normal.
Yeah.
If you want to live with them. And I had friends who actually worked in Hamburg before. They recommended me some people to talk to, and like what are the areas you should stay away from. So that helped a lot. But it was like that was the hardest part, I think. Not kind of finding the job. It was actually like that transition process, because I didn't really have much help.
Right.
And it was scary, like going to a place where I didn't have any friends.
Right.
And I didn't know anyone really personally. But I was lucky my startup was very like tight knit. We had socials like every week.
How big a company is it?
It was only like 40, 50.
Okay. All one office?
It was, one office in Hamburg. And the teams were pretty, like, one room was engineering, one room was BI, one room was marketing, one room was BD, for example. And everyone has lunch together kind of deal, and we always get drinks together after work. So it was like a really fun environment. Like, I wasn't used to it. I know people probably think it's a really common work thing, but...
Was there a language barrier?
No, that's a good question, but no. They all spoke pretty good English. And
Did they speak English around the office?
the BD people all speak, when they're basically kind of getting companies to work with us, they all speak in their own respective languages, like French,
Sure.
Dutch. But engineering all speaks in English. And there's just times where they're talking like some engineering stuff and they're just talking in German to make things like work faster. That's when I'm like, what's happening? But my manager was Russian, so
Fun.
we didn't have a common language, so we had to speak English. So that was fun. And I think that it was just moving so fast. Every single day there's something new. And where I didn't really have a specific project sometimes, it would switch every like week, for example, a new project.
Okay.
So they're smaller. But the impact was still big because like our investors were looking at what we're doing, like, do we fund them or not, kind of thing.
Right.
So the business impact was stronger, while like the user stuff and all the design impact was really from my previous experiences.
Right. So, I mean, like, we'll get to that, but just so that I know and so that people know, what does a business intelligence person do?
Yep. Had to Google that myself after I got the job.
After you got the job.
Well, it was basically working with, the job description was like working with data, engineering skills. You get to basically look at those, you can analyze the data and work with a lot of people. I'm like, that's awesome. Sounds like something I want to do. And I liked what they do, and I like fashion. So I was just thinking, like, this is something I actually enjoy.
I know you mentioned that it was just like different every day, but what was a day on the job like?
Yeah.
Like, what did you sit down and do?
Yeah, so a BI engineer is kind of at my company, what it was there was data that we get from the dev teams, essentially. We retrieve the data through SQL, and then we have to analyze and make it actually human readable. And we have to make sure that the marketing and the BD teams, like, they know what's happening in the company, for example, and we want to basically improve a lot of the processes and automate them all. So it's like a mix of like being a data analyst, but also just like coding a lot, because every single day I was kind of at a computer, actually. So that was kind of one thing. And I would just start the day off. I would run this KPI report I made to send to the investors and work on like smaller projects during the day, where I was querying stuff to understand like how many clicks are we getting, how do we improve these clicks, what are the different metrics we're looking at every single day.
It sounds like you're just like improving decision making through data.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like what a PM does, because they're using data to drive their decisions, right? Like data driven decisions, like that's a buzzword in itself.
Sure.
And I was kind of doing the data stuff that I really missed doing. So that was kind of complementary to like seeing what's important. Like at a company like this, like there's clicks, obviously, but there's also impressions. There's a lot of like click-through rates, like a lot of different things I never really thought about.
So these are all like different metrics that are used to determine how many people on your website, how well your company is doing.
Yeah. It was like the revenue we made was based on ads. So that was why it was really important. Like we need to have an accurate retrieval system in order to understand what's happening on our website.
Yeah.
Are people clicking the ads? Are they coming back? Because we don't have user profiles, for example. So they're all kind of like random users.
You don't have accounts.
We don't have an account.
Right.
No.
So it would just be somebody like going there, clicking on the stuff, and you need to know what the behavior looks like.
Cookie and like following their behavior. And it's interesting to see kind of like on a data level, like what is that user doing? Like, we always say users are doing, like we make assumptions as a PMs, but what is the data really saying? Like what are what is that user doing? Are they just leaving the page, or are they actually clicking and buying something through a website?
Right. So it's the kind of thing where like you're not sitting there with them looking at the thing, but you can say, hey, they clicked on this, 3-second pause, they clicked on this thing. What can we infer from that?
Exactly. So that really helped the product team on engineering to drive decisions through the company.
Okay, cool. So, but you mentioned you were working on like a different thing every week. Was it more stressful than working at a big company?
It was so stressful. I worked, I think, 11-hour days.
Like consistently?
Sorry?
Consistently?
Yeah. And in the beginning, it was because there was so much going on, and it was hard. It was actually hard. Like I had learned Python before, and it was just like all in Python. It was using like different APIs. Like every single API we used was different.
Just again for context, so you and I are like used to tech stuff, but those terms APIs are just like quick shortcuts for you to use other people's stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly. And then so learning how to do that every day and working with marketing, working with people who like I didn't really know. That was the hardest part of the first few weeks. But once I was ramped up, it was more than I started getting more responsibilities, and I became so invested in like what we're doing. Like I really wanted this company to succeed. Right. Like I've always wanted Microsoft and NVIDIA to succeed, but
you had the feeling that like they would regardless.
Exactly. Like me messing up or that would not impact tomorrow's stock prices.
I would love to see you mess up so bad you sink Microsoft.
That's some like ownership right there. While here it was like people would see when I messed up.
Sure.
And I love working with the people I was with, so I didn't want to let them down. If they were asking me for help, I want to help them, but also do my own thing. So balancing and prioritizing was something I had to work on.
Right.
And it got better. Like it was 11-hour days, but then it started becoming more like 7, 8 normal working hours.
And you felt you got the same amount of work done in that time.
Yeah. And I was there for only like 3.5 months actually.
Okay.
So I'm sure if I was there for longer, like 8 months, it would have been better at the end. I probably would have gotten more like long-term projects instead of shorter ones, for example. So
your projects were mostly like, were they like day long, week long, like
2 weeks.
Okay, gotcha.
Week, yeah.
And at the end of it, like you deliver some kind of insight, something like that?
Yeah, insights. Depends on what. Sometimes automating something for BD.
Okay.
So, like automating some of their spreadsheets and everything like that, because a lot of them were trying to like basically call the same customers, for example, a lot of the different kind of metrics, and they didn't understand what was going on. And so that was kind of more the BD side.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I had to work with a lot of different people.
What was adjusting to living somewhere like on the other side of the world like?
It was hard. It was hard for the first 2 weeks. And because it was putting myself out there again, it was the whole Frosh Week thing repeated, where it's like you're trying to make friends, trying to go to as many things as possible.
It's interesting that you bring up Frosh Week.
I know, sorry, yeah. And then I'm sure like in California and Seattle, I had to also make friends.
Sure.
But there were my classmates were there. Like, if I wanted to have dinner with someone, I could just call someone up.
Sure.
Here, it was legit like nobody. So moving there and moving to a startup where there wasn't like a program, like I was basically kind of full-time. Like if I was on exchange, it'd be completely different. I'd be surrounded by different people.
Yeah.
I was lucky my startup had a lot of interns. So I got to know them a lot. So those first 2 weeks are getting to know them, like who I actually like really enjoyed hanging out with.
Yeah.
Different team members that I enjoyed hanging out with as well. And then it was fun. Like every weekend felt like a vacation. So it was great.
What do you mean?
Like, because I was in like Hamburg, I got to travel a lot across Europe, and it was like cheap because you're already on the same continent as like I went to Morocco, I went to Budapest, Lisbon, different places that like, and that was the best part, I think. And
what's your favorite place you got to go?
It's probably the hardest question of the podcast. Favorite place? Honestly, I think it's Hamburg. I think that city is just like, it's the best balance of a really fun city, lots of cool art, pretty like avant-garde, but also a very clean, very posh city. It's like, it's a really confusing city. I like it. And in the beginning it was kind of boring because it was like one lake. Right. And there wasn't
only one lake.
Only one lake, and the weather's not that great there either. But then, as you like kind of live there, you learn that like there's so many things going on. The music's awesome, the beer's great, and it's So I think Hamburg, favorite city.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
you got to live there too.
Yeah, living there I think just makes me biased.
Gotcha.
Automatically.
So, did you know that you were coming back to Microsoft for a third term, like before?
I did.
Like you knew after the summer?
Yeah, I did. So you can kind of see my transition. I went from not really knowing what I was supposed to do in life, where I was like trying different things, kind of confused. But then after my startup, I then started appreciating stability. So every single day, like I told you, I was working kind of long hours. I was really worried something bad was going to happen every day. And I enjoyed that, but I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life yet. I think that I needed more experience so I could handle these problems better. And I was like, I want to work back at Microsoft. I want to work as a PM. I want to own my own product. Have experience, then one day maybe I'll make my own startup. I'll join a startup. So that helped me realize that like I love it, and I thought it was a huge thrill, but it's not for me. Like at where I was.
Okay, gotcha. You felt like you needed to like build yourself more before you can handle that kind of that kind of load.
Exactly.
Okay, so you went back to Microsoft for a third term. Was it different from your first two? And in what way? Because you were in the same location doing at least nominally the same job. Air quotes.
Definitely, and I think that the most different part of this was they knew that I had worked there for 2 summers, and they trusted me with a lot more than I had ever. Like they trusted me a lot in my startup, but in different ways. This was more like they trust me with a product and a feature, where I was helping develop it alongside engineers. I was working with designers every day, and it was actually getting shipped. And it was if this didn't
ship
work,
means like deployed. Other people were using it.
and our customers are enterprise customers. Like one customer means that thousands of people are using it. So it was something that's really important.
Like, and enterprise customers is just like businesses. You've got big businesses who are using this stuff.
Exactly. Like Ford Motors, Accenture. Because there's some companies that are using our product, which I was working on called Dynamics 365. It's a CRM tool, like a customer relationship management tool.
Gotcha.
And I was working on really figuring out a storage model, for example, which I can't really go into, but
sure,
I got to work with a lot of full-time engineers, and I was working on more than one project at once. So that was kind of different. I think
that sounds very different from your previous two.
It was really hard. I started with one, and I was working with a lot of the interns on a notification service.
Sure.
To basically unify all three platforms of like Dynamics. There's something called Flow and Power Apps. Just three different products. And then while I was doing that, I realized it overlapped with a lot of storage stuff, and I started working on kind of doing self-help features. For example, like a FAQ feature. And then I also started working on basically a dashboard of your storage analytics at the same time. So all these projects were happening simultaneously, and that was the biggest difference. Because for once, like my manager trusted me enough to give me different responsibilities that actually had an impact at the end of the day. And that's kind of why I really like that job and the people I worked with.
Right.
They're all really smart, and they were also pretty nice to me when I did not really understand when things were going on. They would explain it to me and understand, like, even though they're treating me like full time, they were kind of lenient on things if I messed up, for example.
Sure.
So like it's about learning at the end of the day. So that was cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've gone there 3 times. You mentioned like you love it. Do you think you'd be coming back there? Where's your head at?
Most likely. Most likely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it still sounds like you've got a lot to learn there.
Yeah, exactly. And definitely there's We'll see what.
Sure. Yeah.
I feel like
So you finished up there over the summer. Yeah. Did you just come straight back to Toronto?
What did I do? It feels like such a blur. I went on a trip with my friend to New York. And in between Europe to Seattle, I did the whole Morocco and Eastern Europe trip.
Sure.
And with my other high school friend for a grad trip. So that was really fun.
Cool.
So I was able to fit some things in between. I went to Hong Kong for a bit at one point too. So the best part about PY, if anyone's like on the fence, I feel like, is the traveling aspect too. And like kind of being able to work, but also do fun things, I think.
Right. Because I think it sounds like, I mean, I know you said you were in Europe, but it sounds like a lot of the traveling you got to do didn't really have to do with your job. It had to do with the portions in between.
Yeah. And you're doing these trips with people who you just met, which is interesting. Like I did my Berlin trip with people from my company, like legit, like the first month we met.
Sure.
And then I would go on like surfing trips and like hiking trips with people from California that I just met as well. So like I think PY really gives you the opportunity to meet so many different people from all different backgrounds.
Sure.
So that's super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So after you took the trips, you came back to 4th year. What was that like after PY?
Bank account wasn't doing as well, but I think I actually missed school a little bit. When I was in California, I really considered doing grad school. Like, I was studying for my GREs in California.
What are GREs?
GREs? The grad school admission exams.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and because in California, like, NVIDIA has a really cool program where you can basically work part-time. You're working full-time, and you're taking part-time Stanford classes. So, really cool program. And that made me kind of like, do I want to do school more? I actually kind of miss it. So, when I came back now, I was like, I want to do a thesis. I actually miss doing a lot of the school stuff and seeing my friends.
What did you, the friends, sure. What did you miss about school?
I missed kind of that, how you're more in control of what your day is like. Like, you get to choose what classes you go to. You choose kind of how much time you want to spend on this project versus another. At work, it's pretty defined, and you can't
do your job.
Yeah, and it's much more responsibility. Like, in school, it's independent. It's you. Sure, there's group projects, but it's really only you there. So I kind of miss that independence a little bit. Like, I love working with people, but I like having my own schedule, and that was fun.
School's kind of flexible that way.
Yeah, exactly.
What did PY change about your approach to school, or like the way you think about it?
The way I think of school. I realized that I can't imagine really my life without doing PY. Now, like, if I were to look back and not do PY, just graduate quickly after my 3rd year summer, after doing 4th year, I think that that's changed our perception of kind of how we value for example, jobs or
Sure.
how we value experiences. It could be anything. Like you could be working for research, you could be working at a hospital, for example, and that value is something that you can't really get from school. Like you can learn how to learn very well at school. You can learn like what are the best ways you can study and maximize your efficiency. But really that application part, working with people who are actually different than you, that's not something that is common.
Right, because like,
people,
like we've got people from a diversity like backgrounds and whatnot, but at the end of the day, these are all engineering students at the University of Toronto.
Exactly, and like the differentiating factor, I feel like every time now that I'm interviewing for full time is like, tell me about your PY, like what happened in the 16 months because you're only graduating now, and it's crazy that you've worked in different places. So I think
and now you can just like send them this episode,
and that's what they're interested about, not really about what did you get on that one test in first year, for example. Like I think school is so important; it's like the foundation.
Right.
But applying that is also something we need to focus more in.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do you think you've like changed as a person over those 16 months? Because you mentioned like you just can't even imagine your life without it.
Yeah. I don't think I've gotten more responsible, but I think I know more about myself. As cheesy as that sounds.
Like what?
Like I was even coming to engineering, like doing Eng first year. No one really knew what they wanted to do.
Sure.
Like I thought I wanted to do masters. I thought I wanted to be in biomed, and look where I am now. Right. I think that every single year I do school, something has changed, and it's like I'm getting closer and closer to that North Star, for example, that I want to achieve. And then like, for once in my life, after PY, I was like, I want to be a PM. Like this is what I want to do, and this is the one time I get to see a product end to end. And that's why I love doing it. It blends like the technical skills, being able to speak the same language as your engineers, but also like design, like having an eye for design is really cool.
Right.
So I think that like PY just helped me open a lot of different doors, like what I wanted to do, but in that field I like.
Right.
And that I think is pretty valuable.
That's cool. What advice would you give to somebody who is currently like either a second year or third year and thinking about kind of the career path forward through university?
I think so. I think in first year, don't be afraid to go to those career fairs. Don't be afraid that like kind of with your experiences, you're putting lifeguarding on there. You're putting all your different retail jobs from like in high school on there. Like don't be like that's job experience. Like every job you do is valuable in my opinion. Like if you make it valuable.
I mean, like to speak to that point, like I worked on a boat, like literally scrubbing gum out of carpets the summer after university. Like I still, and like I worked in security the summer after first year. Like those are still things I talk about in job interviews.
I bring up like my trade show stuff, like working for my mom all the time, like talking to different people. I think that like don't think you're like you're not good enough, for example. That's a common, I think, feeling in first year.
Fair enough.
Maybe not like it's maybe not as strong in U of T where it's kind of like research focused and also school focused. Like jobs aren't the first thing you think about when you enter U of T. But once it starts getting PY where it gets competitive and everything, like just don't hold yourself back if you don't think you're confident enough.
Right.
Like confidence is something. It's like your own perspective. For example, like I thought I couldn't code. I thought I couldn't be an engineer, like a software engineer. Yeah. And it's really practice. Like so many of my friends who didn't have any background in CS or engineering, they got amazing jobs in tech, like through just kind of lead coding or talking to a lot of different people and understand like how to code. And
it sounds like you learned on the job.
Yeah, you learn on the job. You learn from other people. Like you can really do anything, like, especially with an engineering degree. I think it sets you up for a lot of different career paths.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, that's all.
No,
I talk too much. So.
I really don't think so. And even if you do, thank you for talking too much with us. This has been That Thing I Did for a Year. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.